Timeline of Israeli-Palestinian conflict explained in 26 points. Welcome back to another interesting video of Top Mainstream. Violence that began in East Jerusalem in April has expanded to military attacks from both Israel and Palestine. Large-scale injuries and fatalities have been reported. Clashes have broken out between Palestinian Arabs and Jewish groups in Israel. The international community looks divided and is readying to take sides if the current Israel-Palestinian conflict escalates to another war. Israel and Palestine have a long history of violence. Let's take a look at these 26 important dates, explaining the timeline of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So let's start out today's video to learn more about it. Before Christ, Israelite King Solomon built a temple in Jerusalem for Jewish people. It remains the holiest site for them. Those were times of empire building, and Jerusalem was invaded by Egyptian and later Roman campaigners who attacked that temple. In 70 BC, Romans destroyed a reconstructed temple built at the Jerusalem site. Jewish people fled in large numbers during these centuries. 7th century. An Islamic Caliphate army took control of Jerusalem. Flight of the Jewish people continued for centuries. Europe, and particularly in and around Germany, got the biggest population of Jews. 19th century. Zionist movement was launched with the appeal for the return of Jews to Israel, or Palestine as it was known. Post-World War I. The defeat of Germany in the war, 1914 to 1919, saw the rise of Adolf Hitler, who blamed Jews for the country's defeat. He expanded Germany, and Jews were persecuted in areas he controlled. In the post-war settlement, Britain was given the mandate for Palestine and Transjordan, areas including Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Jewish immigration to Israel gained pace. Post-World War II, 1939 to 1945. With support from the US and the UK, Jews created the State of Israel in 1948. The declaration came after Jews failed to sign a deal with Arabs for carving out a separate state from Palestine. 1948. The first Israel-Arab War began after Britain's mandate ended and it lifted its control. Arab countries sided with Palestine, but the war ended with Israel, backed by the US, controlling a large area for its nation. It's estimated 700,000 Palestinians lost their homes and became refugees. 1956. The Second Israel-Arab War began after Egypt announced nationalization of the Suez Canal, an important trade route. Israel invaded Egypt with support from Britain and France. The US and erstwhile USSR brokered a deal to end the war. 1964. Palestinians organized themselves under the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, for struggle against Israel. The PLO was founded in Cairo by the Arab League. Ahmad Shukri was its first leader, although the organization was de facto controlled by the Egyptian government. The PLO stated their goal as the destruction of the State of Israel through armed struggle and its replacement with an independent Palestine state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. 1967. The Six-Day War took place in which Israel defeated Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Israel took control of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem, the area from where the latest series of violence began. More than 250,000 Palestinians were displaced. 1973. Arab nations formed a coalition to attack Israel. It suffered losses but recovered after receiving supplies from the US. The war led to a massive oil crisis. 1978. The US brokered a peace deal between Israel and Egypt. Settling the question of Palestine was part of the deal that came to be known as the Camp David Accord. It was never implemented. 1987. The first Palestinian Intifada was launched. Intifada means uprising or rebellion. Protests and clashes continued for many years in Gaza, the West Bank, and inside Israel. Many people died and scores injured during the Intifada. 1991. Israel begins peace talks with Palestinian leaders, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan in Spain, the Madrid Conference. If you find this video informative, then consider subscribing to our channel. We bring such cool and interesting videos to entertain you on a regular basis. 1993. The first major breakthrough was achieved. Israel and the PLO signed what is called the Oslo Peace Accord. It was backed by the United Nations. 1994. A follow-up deal was signed, called the Cairo Agreement, between Israel and the PLO. The agreements created the Palestinian Authority, which was given the chance of administrating affairs in the West Bank and Gaza. The question of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and the status of Jerusalem remained unresolved. Both Israel and Palestine viewed Jerusalem as their future capital. 1995. Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated in Tel Aviv by Jewish extremist Yigal Amir. The Palestinian Authority was blamed. Shimon Peres assumed the position of acting prime minister. 2000. The second Palestinian Intifada was launched. Clashes erupted after Israeli hardliner Ariel Sharon visited the compound that houses both the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa, the site of current violence. 2002. The Palestinian militant group Hamas launched its first major suicide attack, killing at least 30 Israelis. Israel later conducted an operation to take control of much of the West Bank. 2006. Hamas won election in Gaza, emerging as a political challenger to the Fatah party that was moderate and had won in the West Bank. 2008. Palestinian militants fired rockets into Israel, which responded by pummeling missiles into the Palestinian territory. More than 1,100 Palestinians lost their lives. 13 Israeli soldiers were killed. 2012. Another round of rocket fire between Israel and Palestine. Israel killed a Hamas military chief in the attack. 2014. A 7-week fight ensued after Hamas allegedly kidnapped 3 Israeli girls from a Jewish settlement in the West Bank and killed them. More than 2,000 Palestinians lost their lives. 2015. Seeking re-election, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that there would be no two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian question. 2017. The Donald Trump administration of the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and announced shifting of its embassy from Tel Aviv to this city. The decision saw fresh protests and clashes in the West Bank and Gaza. 2018. Clashes continued for several months between Palestinian protesters and Israeli security forces. Rocks, bombs, and rockets were exchanged. Many died. 2021. Israel barricades the Damascus Gate Plaza in East Jerusalem on April 12th. It is a popular gathering place for Palestinians during Ramadan. Protests broke out. On April 16th, Israel limits the number of people who can pray at Al-Aqsa in East Jerusalem to 10,000 people. Al-Aqsa is considered the third holiest mosque in Islam. Clashes erupt and spread to Gaza and the West Bank. So this was a short video explaining the timeline of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What are your opinions about this whole situation? Let us know in the comments section below. We hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, then make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel, Top Mainstream. We'll bring you another exciting video very soon. Till then, peace out.